Welcome back to Heroes Next Door. Thank you all for joining us. If you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe, hit that notification so you can get a lot more of these videos. Today I'm going to be doing a answer your guys' questions on our video in Station Rigs of what's in a $200,000 ambulance. There's one question that keeps coming up over and over and over, so I wanted to take just a little bit of time and explain it a little bit better. And that's the idea of a chase car versus a MICU service and what the different ambulances are designed here on the East Coast and how we operate in Pennsylvania. Here in Pennsylvania on the East Coast, we have 4 levels of services. We have first responder, which is your QRS. We have EMT, which brings your ambulance. We have an AEMT, which can be on an ambulance or a chase car. And we have a paramedic that could be on an ambulance or in a chase car. If we look back to that QRS, if you check out our video in regards to East Brandywine, they have a pickup truck that's set up to be their first responder unit. That's a chase car unit. That's what we're kind of talking about. The reason for that is because they don't need to do the transports. The ambulance does that. They are there simply to support the transporting units. They're there much quicker than most of the ambulances because trying to cover our territories, we strategically place ambulances and chase cars to make it the most effective for our area. When the ambulances come out, you have a couple of different options. This is where we're talking about MICU versus chase car versus ambulance. The MICU is an ambulance with a paramedic on it. A regular ambulance is just BLS. So that's that BLS versus ALS thing. I know it seems a little bit confusing, but it really depends on where you're serving and the population that is there. So I'm gonna go back to that video of Keystone Valley. A lot of the questions are coming across as, it looks like they have ALS equipment on the truck, but they're a BLS unit. They are strictly a BLS unit. Tower Direct in our area takes care of them for the ALS unit, and that's a chase car. The reason for that, even though they come out of the same house, they are 2 separate companies running out of the same area. Kind of like the new video that we did on Lebanon City, they have multiple companies underneath one roof. So Tower Direct chooses to use a chase car rather than put an ambulance because they don't need to transport. Keystone, they actually transport all the patients. What's the advantage and disadvantage of each one? Well, look at it this way. If I am a chase car, which I've done for many, many years, I do nothing but ALS. If it's a BLS call, I either release it or I'm not dispatched at all. I get on scene, I do an assessment of a patient, realize that it's not a life threat, the person's not gonna die in the next 10, 15 minutes, that I need any ALS interventions, I can then release that to the BLS crew to do the transport. That frees me up to run another ALS call, so I can get more ALS calls. I don't have to worry about that BLS. Also, when I'm on a chase car, what I liked about it, many times I'm by myself. I don't necessarily have to have a partner. So I have a little bit more freedom. If I want to go out for lunch, I go out for lunch. I don't have to answer really to anybody, but that can also be very difficult. If you don't have an ALS partner with you, you're relying on that BLS side of it, you have to have some very good communication skills because when it hits the fan and you need to get a lot of things done, you might actually call for an assistance of another chase car. I've done that a couple of times in my career. I've called in my partner to help me on some very critical patients. So we'll get an ambulance and 2 chase cars because I need that other ALS provider. Now let's talk about the ALS or the MICU side of it. Now we're taking that medic out of the chase car and putting him on an ambulance that does transport. The advantage of this is I can get rid of that whole truck. Those trucks run you anywhere from $50,000 up to $100,000 depending on how you outfit it. Well, that's a pretty significant cost that I now can eliminate and put me with all my same equipment on an ambulance. Advantage of that is no matter what you get dispatched for, if it's dispatched as a BLS but turns out to be ALS, I don't have to wait for my partner or a chase car to come get me. I can begin ALS treatments right away. The disadvantage of being on a MICU is I may get stuck on a BLS call. And I don't mean stuck because, I don't want to take care of patients, but if I have someone that, has a simple ankle fracture, maybe we went to the local soccer fields and they got an ankle fracture that doesn't require an ALS assessment or ALS treatments, I am now driving that ambulance to the hospital. And our hospitals can be anywhere from 20 minutes to a half hour away. I'm stuck now on that truck because if I go back to that, we'll say, 10 minutes after I leave, the coach has a heart attack on the soccer field. Well, now another unit has to come in and a chase car has to come in, and I'm tied up on that BLS transport. So like I said, there's some advantages and some disadvantages to having the MICU versus chase car service, and it really depends on where you live. What kind of service, what kind of call volume are you getting? Are you majority BLS transports and you don't necessarily need a medic or multiple medics? Or are your ALS services servicing multiple BLS units? When we ran here in Chester County for years, all of us were chase cars, and we came out of the hospitals. So we serviced, I want to say out of Brandywine Hospital where I live, we serviced almost 22 different municipalities. And in that, I want to say 11 to 14 different ambulance services at one point in a time. So it made sense to do a chase car helping those guys rather than us being in a MICU service that we may get tied up. When I'm running on the MICU service, I like it personally because, one, I think we do a better job. I'm not working with people that I may not know. I serviced 11 or 14 different ambulance companies while I was on a chase car. Well, each one of those have different personnel. When I'm on a MICU, I know my partner. I know what they're thinking. They know how I operate. They know how I like to set up my IVs. They know when to put on the monitor, those kind of things. So my patient care, I believe, gets a little bit better when you're on kind of a MICU service. Yeah, I can get tied down with a BLS call, like I mentioned, but overall, you're getting a better service or better care of a patient because you have an ALS provider, even on a BLS call. So that's a pretty big advantage. And another thing is, if we take that AEMT that we mentioned before in our tiered system and pair that with a paramedic on a MICU service, you essentially create a critical care transport truck. So you have the ability to really delegate responsibilities between each other, where that AEMT can start the IV while I do the intubation. And once I intubate, they can take care of the airway while I push medications and read the monitor and stuff like that. So it really becomes a well-oiled machine between your AEMT and your medic when you're running on a MICU service. Where if you're just BLS, you're kind of hanging out in the wind until that ALS provider shows up. And depending on the location, like I said, we had Brandywine Hospital that covered 14 different municipalities or ambulance services. It could take them a half hour to get to you. So now you have to take care of that critical patient that was dispatched as a BLS, but when you arrived, you did your assessment and you figured out, no, this is truly an ALS, you're gonna have to take care of that patient. So you gotta be good at your skills, good at patient assessment, good at differential diagnosis, even as that BLS provider. And I found those providers are much more equipped to handle those critical patients. So when I arrived on scene in a chase car, a lot of my stuff is ready to go. So I can move fairly quickly, but our communication is sometimes lax because I don't know who they are 100%. Each day, especially in a volunteer service, could be a different person. So hopefully, once again, I answered your questions. This is Heroes Next Door. Thank you all for watching. If you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe, hit that notification. We're still building, we're still doing good, but we want to answer these questions and it's all up to you.